it's Sarah, and today I'm bringing to you the books that I DNF'd in 2020. When I first started my booktube channel, I was really good at DNFing things. Like if I was reading something and not enjoying it, I'd be like, fuck this book, I'm not finishing it. But somewhere along the way, I think in the quest to be able to still give my opinion and rate things, I started forcing myself to finish things that I didn't like. And I feel like 2020 was the year that I tried to take ownership of my reading and be more deliberate about DNFing things. You will notice if you watch my worst books of 2020 that there's a few books on that list that definitely could have fallen into this category, but in those cases they were books that I was trying to understand why other people hyped them up so much. So I think that's essentially where my DNFing has landed. If I'm reading something because a bunch of people recommended it and I just don't understand why everyone likes it, I'll finish it, or if it's for an experiment or something, I'll finish it. But if I'm just reading it for my own enjoyment and I'm just really flat out not having a good time, I will DNF it. Maybe that was just a pointless explanation of when I DNF and when I don't, but that's kind of where we've landed with this list. So I think on this list, let me look, there was like 6 books that I DNF'd. The first one on the list is Iced by Karen Marie Moning. This was a continuation of the Dark Fever series that I think I put on my favorites list last year. It's essentially like an adult urban fantasy romance series about fairies in Ireland. And what I didn't like about this book is that it centered on this main character named Dani, who in the original series was only 15 years old. And since I think only a few years pass in this book, honestly, maybe it isn't even a few years. I think it's like 1 year after. She's only like 16 or 17. And what was really creepy about this book was that all the adult male characters, like all the fae, were like sexualizing her and like wanted to get with her. And I thought that was really weird because if Karen Marie Moning wanted Dani to be a sex object, she should have just written this series taking place like 10 years later so that she could be like 25, and then a mortal fae could totally sexualize her if they want because she'd be an adult. But the way she even thinks in the book is very childish, and so it was really awkward to be reading about all these like horny grown men like wanting to like fuck her. Also, the plot wasn't very compelling. Like something I really liked about the first series was that I actually was compelled by like the mystery and the different like fae lore that was like propelling the story forward. I also just didn't want to color my opinion of the Dark Fever series because I liked it so much. So I just thought it would be better to DNF it all around. I was like, I'm straight up not having a good time, so let's just stop with that. The next one on this list may be a little controversial, but that was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I know dark academia has become such a popular aesthetic and such a popular like book thing that people really like, and in theory, I like dark academia too. But this book, although it is one of like the originators of dark academia, I couldn't get behind it. I just found Donna Tartt's writing to be really inaccessible. She did a lot of like telling and not showing. Large periods of time would just go by. We would just be like, oh, 3 months went by and this is what happened to the characters. I guess I should backtrack and tell you what the book is about. But basically it is about this friend group that take a Latin class that's almost kind of like a cult. And so our main character, he gets into this Latin class and he starts becoming friends with all these people who are like really affluent because they're at this like really fancy private university in, I think it's in Vermont. It was in New Hampshire. I'm actually from New Hampshire. I should probably remember this. I know it's in New England somewhere. They all get kind of embroiled in this like murder mystery. Like one of the friends in the group ends up being murdered. And so it's all about like what happened and who did it and why did they do it. That sounds interesting, but what's funny is this book is so long. The audiobook is probably like 30 something hours. And I listened to like 10 hours of this, and at the point that I got to in the book, the friend in the group still hadn't been murdered. Like I knew which one was going to be killed because of some like flashbacks to like the future, but at present where I was in the book, he hadn't even been killed yet. So goddamn slow. And I didn't like the characters at all. I mean, I don't think they're meant to be likable characters. I feel like that's a thing in literary fiction a lot. You're not really meant to like root for the characters. Also, the audiobook was read by Donna Tartt, and the main character who is the narrator is a man. And I'm not like against a woman reading that, but she like made a voice for him. And the voice she made for him was just like not very good. I don't know, 0 to 10, would not recommend. I had to give up after a while. I was like reading it for months. Like I was really trying. I was like, I'm going to be one of those people that likes The Secret History. I'm going to be, you know, educated and fancy, and I'm not. It wasn't for me. My brain said no, and I had to DNF it. The next book on my list is Silent in the Grave by Deanna Raybourn. I decided to pick this up because her other series, Veronica Speedwell, is one of my favorites of all time, and so I thought this would have similar energy. Veronica Speedwell is basically like a mystery series about this woman in like the, I think it's in the 1900s. No, when does it take place? 1800s? I don't know. It's in like Victorian England. When was that? I don't know. And so Veronica Speedwell, the titular character of the other series, is like badass, like amazing. Like she's just like everything I wish I could be, especially in Victorian England when women weren't really allowed to do a lot. So I assumed that this main character would be very similar to Veronica. She was really weak. She was a really weak character. She, in the beginning of the book, her husband passes away and so she becomes a widow. It's all about her trying to find out what happened to her husband because she kind of suspects that maybe he was murdered. She pairs up with this other guy who like is a business associate of her like dead husband. It's kind of implied that there's gonna be a romance between them, but the guy kind of sucks. I probably only got like a quarter of the way through this because the writing just didn't feel the same as the Veronica Speedwell series. Like I feel like it wasn't as like fun and compelling. There were a lot of like weird slurs. You can read my review if you want to know specifically like what kept being said. But yeah, I don't know, it just didn't have the same energy as Veronica Speedwell and I was pretty disappointed because I just wanted more Deanna Raybourn content if it was gonna be good, but this was not good. The next book on my list is Roomies by Christina Lauren. I had some bad Christina Lauren luck last year. Christina Lauren is one of my favorite romance authors. I feel like they hit the nail on the head a lot, but then there's been a 50-50 chance sometimes that I don't like their books. And Roomies probably is my least favorite of theirs because this is the only one that I've actually like DNF'd. Actually, that's not true. There's one more Christina Lauren book on this list. I forgot. Roomies is actually, weirdly, the first Christina Lauren book that I ever heard people talk about. It's about this girl whose uncle is like running a Broadway show and there's this busker at the subway that she always goes to that she's like secretly in love with even though she's never spoken to him, and she finally introduces herself to him as like, you should be in my uncle's musical, but then he's like, oh, I'm from Ireland and I'm about to be deported, so she's like, why don't we get married? I actually love fake marriage as a trope, so I was really thinking that I was going to love this book, but I did not. It just didn't feel like the other Christina Lauren books, maybe because it's one of their older ones. It was written only from the female's perspective, and you'll hear me repeat this multiple times about Christina Lauren, but I feel like their strongest books are when they write the male and female perspective, because I feel like when they only write from one, it's just not as enthralling to me. And this one, I just feel like the girl was like weirdly obsessed with the guy because she had just seen him so much, and so I feel like she really romanticized who he was going to be as a person, and she just kept talking about how hot she thought he was, and it was just really cringy, and I just couldn't get past the cringiness, so I just said, you know what, we're done. This is it. And then the next book, like I said, I didn't even realize was another Christina Lauren book, and that was The House by Christina Lauren. I've essentially made it my goal to read all of their books so that I can like make a video kind of telling you guys which of theirs is good to pick up and which ones you should avoid. This will be on the list to avoid. But The House is actually one of their oldest books, and it's actually a YA thriller. I don't really know what genre they were trying to put it. It's like supernatural. I don't really know where they were trying to put it in YA. It's about this house that this boy lives in that is alive. Like basically like he grew up in this house and it just like takes care of him and all the inanimate objects are alive. And the main female character is this girl that went away to like a boarding school, I think, and then her dad loses her job, so she's got to come back to her hometown. Her and the boy like very quickly fall in love. It's very insta-lovey. It just doesn't feel like any other Christina Lauren book that I've ever read. I understand that they typically write a lot of like new adult romance, and so maybe that's why I enjoy their older characters better, but the teenager stuff, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It wasn't a vibe. I don't know what else to say about it. It just was really cringy YA, and I wasn't here for it. And then the last book on this list is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I actually don't know if this is considered YA or adult. I don't really know where Riley Sager falls. Let me know down below if you know. But this is about this girl who is really hard up for cash, and she sees this ad in the newspaper that's like, if you come live in this really expensive, I don't know, I guess they're like, it's an apartment building, but it's like really bougie, and they're like, if you come be like a house sitter, you can make a ton of money in 3 months. And so she decides to take them up on the offer. As she gets to staying in this apartment, she soon finds out that things are not as they seem. This book is on this list not because I hated it so much that I DNF'd it. This was more so I was reading a couple of different books at once, and this one kind of got left on the back burner, and by the time I realized I hadn't finished it, it had been a few months, and I just kind of had the realization that I didn't really care about finishing it. There was nothing like particularly wrong with it. It was a fine book. I think I would have given it 3 stars if I kept reading it, but I just kind of was like, why am I gonna keep reading this if I don't really want to, beyond being able to rate it and put it on Goodreads? And like I said, it would have gotten a really mediocre rating anyway. I don't know, maybe Riley Sager's not for me. I've never really tried to read any of his other books. Let me know down below if there are ones that you think I should read. But yeah, that brings me to the end of this DNF list. If you wanna know what my actual favorite books were of the year, I've already posted that video. I've also already posted my worst books of the year. And so this kind of like sums up a lot of my reading. I have a couple other videos coming out soon for like end of the year stuff. I know I'm also like posting this stuff kind of late in January, so hopefully you guys are still interested in knowing about my reading in 2020. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day. Location, let's focus on communicating, 'cause I just need the time and place to come through.
Send me your location, let's